the same slope, right? If they're parallel. So now we got to figure out what we're going to do with this next problem that is saying the same thing, only we want the lines to be perpendicular. All right. So we got the point -2, 3, and we want to be perpendicular to this. So y equals mx plus b.
That's a good start.
We got an x and a y, right? So all I need, I'm done, if I can figure out my m. All right, so what do you think?
Move 2x over to the other side and then divide by negative.
Okay, so what you're telling me to do is, he says, this equation that I gave you, we need to rewrite it. And we need to rewrite it. Chase, you all right?
Yeah,
We need to rewrite it by getting y by itself. So he said, let's subtract the 2x. And divide by -4. So y equals, all right, what happens right here, guys? So positive 1/2 x, and then minus a fourth. Now, that's not the answer. That's the line I gave you. What is the slope of this line? Now that we have y by itself, what is the slope of that line? 1/2. If we were doing parallel, we'd use 1/2. But we're doing perpendicular. So who remembers the relationship between perpendicular lines?
You gotta
Jordan?
flip it.
Okay,
Right.
that's part of it. Yep,
True.
you gotta flip it and change the sign.
Real.
So when lines are perpendicular, one slope is positive and one slope is negative, and they are reciprocals of each other. So the slope I'm gonna use right here is going to be what? -2. I'm going to flip it and change its sign. That's what you do with perpendiculars. You flip them and change the sign. So 3 equals -2 times -2 plus b. So 3 equals 4 plus b. And it looks like b equals -1. So Zion, what are we putting in the answer blank? No! Zion, you need to pay attention, sweetheart. In the answer blank goes the equation of the line. So y equals -2x minus 1. Okay? So the -1, Zion, is the y-intercept. That's the b. But you have to have y equals mx plus b in the answer blank. Okay? Mom asks you today, you go home, you're sitting at the dinner table, Mom says, what'd you learn in school today, or what'd you talk about in school today? You're going to tell her we talked about the fact that lines that have this, lines that are parallel have the same slope, and lines that are perpendicular have opposite reciprocal
What
slopes.
you told me that last year?
What?
What you told me that last year?
Well, tell them again, because probably Mom forgot.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Now, notice P5. Solve graphically with calculator. The next time we have class, which I feel like I see you guys every day. Is this tomorrow? Do we have class? I don't think so. So the next time I see you will be what, Friday? We are going to do that part. You got to have a calculator. All right? So even if you haven't bought your own yet, you go to the library and check one out, you borrow one from a friend, we are going to do calculator work next time we're together. Okay? For now, I forgot to tell you that yesterday. So for now, we're skipping that. But I've given you warning. You got to have a calculator next time. So we're going to go down to number 2 now. So we're on P5, number 2. Solve using radicals, square rooting.
Square root both of them.
Yep. So I heard somebody back there say,
Yeah, that's me.
to solve this equation, I have lots of options, but the directions tell me specifically, take the square root of both sides. Now that is so simple, but there's one little piece that once in a while we forget. All right? Tell me what the square root of 4x squared is. 2x. What is the square root of 25? On the side that has the number, just the number, not the x, it's always plus or minus. The square root of 25 is positive 5 or negative 5. Every time you have a squared equation, kids, no matter what, I'll look on the page, there's tons of them. Anytime you have a squared equation, you're going to have two answers. And the only way to get two answers is to put that plus or minus in there. So don't forget, the side that has just the number, you're going to put plus or minus. So now when you divide by 2, the answer to the problem is plus or minus 5/2. Do not be confused when you look at the next problem. You're going to do it exactly the same way. You're going to take the square root of both sides. Don't mess around with that. Take the square root of both sides. Because what happens when you take the square root of something squared?
It just goes away.
The radical and the exponent cancel each other, right? So it's just x minus 3 equals what? Plus or minus 5. The side with the plain number is plus or minus when you square root it. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I have 3 plus or minus 5. You all right with that?
Yes.
So what does x equal? X equals 3 plus 5, which is 8. Or x equals 3 minus 5, which is negative 2. So your answers are 8 and negative 2. Always two answers.
Where
to a quadratic. 3 minus 5.
But you did it a different way too.
Did you get 8 and negative 2? Yes. All right. Oh boy. What about this one?
Distribute and then take the square root.
Now I heard somebody say distribute. I want to be careful. Can we distribute into a quantity that's being squared? No. Now, could we FOIL that out, x minus 4, and then distribute the 3 in? Yes, but we don't want to do that. If we're going to be taking the square root of both sides, this is a really good thing to have. Because when I square root this, that's going to go away, right? The problem is this guy. You knew, you were guessing, what do I do with him? Do I distribute him? What do I do? You know he's a problem. I can't distribute him because this is squared. So what do you suggest? What else could we do with him? Divide. We could divide both sides by 3. So now I have only x minus 4 squared, which is good. I like having just that, equal to 3. Now I'm going to square root both sides. And some of you are back there getting a little bit nervous. Mrs. Ford, 3 is not a square. Yep, welcome to the real world. Most numbers aren't. So our answer is just going to be x minus 4. Well, our next step is going to be x minus 4, because these cancel, remember, equals what? Plus or minus the square root of 3. One more time. The plain number always gets a plus or minus. So now add 4. Is that 2 answers, just like this was? Is that 2 answers? Yeah, but they're not as pretty as this. Your 2 answers would be 4 plus the square root of 3, or 4 minus the square root of 3, right? And there is no reason to write it that way. If you want to leave it like this, that's perfectly okay. Perfectly okay. No reason to split it up. Can't simplify them, so we wouldn't even split it up. Okay, one more of those, and then we're going to have some real fun. What do you think about D? Don't overcomplicate it. What do you think we should do with this guy? Square root both sides. Right from the very beginning, we should just square root both sides. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, Mrs. Ford, there's a 2 in there. Remember, we had a 3 over here, and you divided it out first? Yeah, there's a difference between this 3 and this 2, right? See it?
Yes.
So we're not going to mess around with this 2. We're just going to take the square root of both sides. So what happens on this side? 2x plus 1. And what happens on this side? Plus or minus 4. Now that means that 2x plus 1 equals positive 4, or 2x plus 1 equals negative 4. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So now we're going to solve both of these and get our answers. So we'll subtract 1 and divide by 2. So one answer was 3/2. We'll subtract 1 and divide by 2. Negative 5/2. Anybody have a question about that? We're going to do a couple completing the square problems. That's probably all we'll have time for. Everybody okay with this? Everybody get those answers? Okay. All right. So let's look at this guy. Now, this is another one of those cases where there's lots of ways to do this problem. So probably you guys, because of your experience, and I know how hard the algebra teachers hit factoring, you're probably looking at this guy thinking, why do you factor that, right?
Yeah.
And you can, but the directions say we're going to complete the square instead. I love math. One of my least favorite things in the world is completing the square. But there are times when we have to do it, so we must learn how. When do we have to do it? Remember when we're finding centers and radiuses of circles? If you find a circle that's not in standard form, you have to complete the square on it in order to find its center. So that's an example. So we're going to learn the process, or talk about the process. You've done it before. Anybody remember how we start? What did you say, Sophia? Okay, that is factoring. That's what I would do if I were going to factor it. I'm going to actually complete the square. That will work on this problem. It will solve the problem, but we want to do it by completing the square.
You would use quadratic formula?
I absolutely could do the quadratic formula, but these directions say complete the square. So what you're doing is you're emphasizing the point that you've got options. Me and old Mrs. Ford is taking away the options and saying we're going to complete the square. So step 1, move the 7. Move the 7 to the other side. Now, when I move it, I leave the gap where it was. because I am going to have to figure out a number to put in that gap. A new number. 7 isn't a good number. So I move the 7 to the other side, and I'm going to make a space. And of course, if I put something on this side, I'm going to have to put something on this side too. Now, is it ringing a bell? What number, what number am I going to put on both sides? You remember, Audie?
9,
Yes. Why?
because that'll turn into 16 and then you can square root that.
Oh, no. It's kind of a nice little side effect that it turns into 16, but that's not why I put the 9 there. 9 is the right number, but the reason's wrong. Jane?
Can you take half of 6 and then square it?
To fill in this blank, you take half of the b term and square it. And when I say b term, in a quadratic equation, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. Remember that? So when you do the quadratic formula, that's your a, that's your b, that's your c. So you take half of whatever is hooked to the x. So what's half of negative 6? Negative 3. And then you square it, and you get 9. So we add a 9 to both sides. So one more time. To find the number, to fill in the blank, you take half of the b term, which is the plain x. The plain x term. Take half of that and square it. Now, that is a perfect square. That right there factors into x minus 3 times x minus 3. Do you see that? If you do it right, you will always get a perfect square. And the perfect square will always be x. That will be an x. This sign will be whatever it is. So that's a minus. This is going to be a minus. And then the 3 is the square root of 9. So if we had x squared minus 4, let's say plus 14x plus 49, that perfect square would be x plus 7. And that will always happen, guys, if you've done it correctly. If you have filled in the blank with the right number, that will always happen. So we have x minus 3 squared equal to, as Audie said, 16. That's beautiful. Doesn't always happen. Now, can we take the square root of both sides like we were doing before? And what will it say if we do that? X minus 3 equals, watch it, plus or minus 4. Remember, we always have the plus or minus on the plain number. So x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4. So x equals 3 plus or minus 4. So what are my answers? 3 plus 4?
X equals 7.
7.
3 equals negative 1.
3 minus 4, negative 1. Perfect. Okay, we're going to do one more. We're going to do the same thing. All right? So let's see how far you can get on your own. Let's look at B, and we're going to complete the square. So can you think what to do first? Don't say it. Don't say it out loud. See if you can do the first step. Can you remember what was the very first thing I did in the last problem? Don't say it out loud. Just do it on your paper.
This will wake me up.
What was the first thing I did? Miss McCoy? Exactly. So everybody should have added the 2 to the other side. And remember, we purposefully leave a gap there where the 2 was, because we know we have to add another number, a different number.
32.
I hear 32. I hear 16.
Oh. Yeah, well, I said 32.
Everybody agreed with 16?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, if you said 16, you're right. Now, why are we adding 16? Because half of 8 is 4, and 4 squared is 16.
I forgot the half.
Well, 8 squared's not 32 either.
No, it's not. 64.
You have a
Bad
bad
math.
awful day.
Yeah,
It's
doesn't matter.
okay.
It's
It's
alright.
alright.
I'll bounce back.
You'll bounce back, okay. Now, the next step is, you have to write this as a perfect square. X plus 4, perfect. X plus 4, absolutely right. Equals 18. Now what? Square root. So x plus 4, remember these just cancel, so that's easy. Plus or minus the square root of 18. Uh-oh. Ding, 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 ding. 18 breaks down. So 18 breaks down into 9 and 2, which is 3 and 3 and 2. So x plus 4 equals plus or minus 3 root 2.
Yep. X equals.
And then x equals negative 4 plus or minus 3 root 2. How about that? And I think our period's over.
Go.
So, if you have questions, stay here and ask. If not, you're heading off to eat. And next time I see you, we're gonna have a calculator, and we're gonna finish completing the square, okay?
Mrs. Gordon, when is like the first set of homework?
All the homework is turned into